certain financial organizations that have a lot of world power that are like, we want the new world to look like this, to eat bugs or whatever. You have this. And then you also have some where it's like, well, we want our God to come back down from the sky. So we have people that want the new earth to be a religious thing. Those are the people that want the new earth to be UFOs land, aliens come. I mean, there's so many
There's
versions.
massive divisions, right?
Yeah.
So what can humanity do to help, bridge the division, bridge the divide, because it just seems to be escalating, which I guess, it's natural considering we're in such a transitional phase, and there's usually a lot of chaos before we can achieve coherence in systems in general. Welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I am Faust Chicho, and today I'm excited, delighted to be once again joined by my old friend, my fellow Leo, Tyler Ellison. Tyler,
Faust,
thanks for coming, brother.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
Appreciate you beaming in, man. So Tyler was one of my first guests way back when I first started my podcast, and him and I had been working together for months. We had gotten a chance to get to know each other a little bit. He's helped me immensely in my journey to get to this seat and have a voice that I believe is helping other people. So I'm grateful to Tyler, and I've learned a lot from him, and I'm excited to introduce him again to my audience, which is much, much larger now than it was when we first had our remote interview way back. God, it was in the middle of all that nuts that was going on during the 2020-2021 health crisis, air quotes for those listening. But Tyler, give everyone a refresher on your background, because you have such a unique upbringing and background to what you do, which, by the way, everyone, Tyler is also a channel. So we're going to get into some really interesting concepts, ideas, philosophies. Stick around. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it. And it's so crazy, right? That was when we first did our episode.
Yeah.
The health crisis. I like how you described it. That's a great way to talk about it. Very neutral. And I think that was when, is that when you started? Like when everything got more constricted? Is that when you began this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Literally, that's when we were like, what are we doing? There's literally, they shut everything down. So my dear friend was like, you're going to start a podcast. I'm like, everyone's fucking starting a podcast. He's like, yeah, but you're going to start one. I'm like, me?
I get it. I mean, you because I think every podcast is so different. Every, I guess, podcast producer will have guests or talent that they gravitate towards. And I would wager that the people that you gravitate towards are very specific, I think, to you, your interests. So whoever told you to do it, it's like, great suggestion.
That's my buddy, my boy.
Heck yeah. But just to answer your question, so I do a lot of things that I really like, if that makes sense. I know that might sound vague, but my interests are all over the place. What would you... I mean, I can give you my accolades. I can be like, I have this and that, but like, is there...
Well, just the way that you come from a more Eastern, your studies into the Eastern philosophies, I think, are unique in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so I'm definitely happy to talk about that. So my background with Eastern medicine is specifically TCM and acupuncture. I did that at the University of Bridgeport. It was a graduate program there. I practiced for a little bit. I got to say, I prefer the energetics and the energetic philosophies behind the TCM, behind the acupuncture. When TCM was first created, right? It's really the creation of how would I even describe it? It is a modern creation that the Chinese government produced, where they sort of sterilized the traditional medicine. It used to be very shamanic, but when they needed to create a unified, national medical system, what they did was they took all of the folk medicine, the acupuncture, and all of this, and they just tried to make it as materialistic as possible, right? So I find the energetics behind it's what I'm more into. But I'm a licensed acupuncturist. I'm a Taoist alchemy practitioner, I guess you could say. I'm a part of a Taoist lineage, the Universal Healing Tao, and it's the type of philosophy and energetic practices that the acupuncture actually comes from. So I've always talked about the Eastern meditations as sort of acupuncture without having to use needles.
Yes.
But in addition to that, I mean, I do a lot of Kabbalistic work. I'm a big fan of ceremonial magic. The Tree of Life fascinates me. We're doing a training right now. We're doing all 22 meditations connected to the Tree of Life. So we're doing one a week and leading a whole bunch of people. But the occult is my obsession, and I got into the occult because of my channeling. Specifically, I first wanted to become spiritual so I could find myself. Right? And then I started learning more about myself. I started discovering more information. And then my spirituality went from self-discovery to information retrieval, right? How do I grow my perspective so I can know as much as the source does, but on the human level, right? For what's relevant. So my spirituality eventually became, how do I activate these psychic skills and go deeper with information retrieval? And the information retrieval turned into channeling, connecting with other entities and then, letting them speak through me.
Yes. And that's how we met. I heard your story, and at the time I was like just diving headfirst into channeled material. I had been very moved by Conversations with God, which was a series of books channeled by Neil Donald Walsh, by Seth. One of them, Seth was channeled by Jane Roberts. Yeah. Esther Hicks channeled Abraham. I couldn't get enough of it, and I knew that it was going to be part of my, on a very real level. I knew it was part of, because I was so excited by it, and I also wanted to learn how to tap into that energy and be able to commune with, first my higher self, the part of me that is outside of the constraints of physical reality, the part of me and that part of, and everyone has this part that is not bound to that, but has a greater perspective. You know what I'm saying? And you were instrumental. I trained with a lot of channels to learn how to tap into that and open that communication within myself. And at the time, I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, But out of everyone, I spent the most time with you, working with you, Skyping with you, meditating, learning how to connect, and you're a great teacher for anyone who's looking for a spiritual guide, who can prescribe meditations to help you achieve whatever it is you're looking to achieve. Tyler is the man, and you also began to bring forth an entity which is kind of the same lineage that Bashar, who is probably the most famous person who channels the entities of this lineage, Daryl Anka, who is a former guest on my show, and the name of the entity, as far as and pronounce, is Rioka, right? No.
Yeah, that's right. Rioka. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that just putting all those cards on the table for everyone listening at home. And so my God, Tyler and I have been talking for about, the moment he got here to Georgia, we haven't shut up. And our conversations have just spanned biblical proportions, to say the least.
Totally. And we really hit the ground running.
Yeah. So the question is, let's begin with, you had an incredible experience with Kundalini energy. Now I have, and I'm friends with, and I have a lot of respect for, I've had some guests on who, they see all this as veiled, I don't want to say Luciferianism, but evil. They have this fear about, the Kabbalistic practices and Kundalini and because it's very Christian based kind of set of beliefs, and the serpent and I'm just like, but so I know, and I'm kind of an enigma to them the way they are to me, because I know so many people using these practices for good, to help people, to gain self-knowledge, to gain more access to information, and to align in heart and mind, which is something I know Jesus would very much encourage humanity to do, and does. But you had an experience, I think it was in 2013, where that was pretty remarkable with Kundalini energy. And
100%.
do you want to, maybe you want to share that with everyone?
So I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. So this was without really doing practices or techniques designed to raise the Kundalini, as they say it, for the listeners, they say it is dormant at the base of the spine as an energy potential, and then through Kundalini yoga and other things, you can stoke the Kundalini.
Yeah.
Starts to rise up the spine, and this power that is your own body's sexual power, diminutive version of the Earth's sexual power, this rises up to the brain and essentially activates genius in people. I mean, you get a lot of benefit from bringing the sexual power up. That's what made my channeling really what it is. I started doing the techniques, and sure enough, I'm like saying things that even I'm like, whoa, where's this coming from? And it's because you're feeding the upper centers.
Yes.
I mean, what's the alternative, right? I mean, for men, it's the release of all of our energy, and then we're tired and depleted if we do that too much, right? So I find it's just a natural thing to bring the sexual power up to the brain. And they say in the golden age, that was like how it was done. Yeah, people they were like, how would I put it?
The Egyptians knew about it.
Yeah. The idea, it's almost like you're celibate until you're like, okay, we're doing this for either intimacy or a spiritual purpose or whatever. But the idea is the lust that we deal with as a culture. It's like this is not as present in these golden eras, because all of that power, instead of it staying at the bottom of the spine, now it's just naturally being brought to the brain. So that craniosacral pump and the circulation of the craniosacral fluid, right?
These are spinal fluid.
Exactly. It's carrying all of this. I know Dr. Joe Dispenza does a lot on the biochemistry of how that happens.
Right.
But it's certainly not evil. We can get into the nature of evil. I enjoy talking about evil as much as I do goodness, because I don't know, they both seem to really like the spotlight in our dimension, so why not talk about them and study it? But
very true.
But this Kundalini awakening, I mean, I was sitting outside, and it was in a thunderstorm. No rain, though, but thunderstorm at nighttime. It's somewhere close to midnight, I think. And I'm meditating. I'm just taking in all of this power, and I asked to be guided. I'm like specifically putting that out there. And I awaken a part of my psyche, right? It's like my own voice, right? The narrator that we all have in our brains. It's this voice, but I can tell it's like a very special version of this voice, where it wasn't just random, personal Tyler thoughts. It's like, you described it as higher self connection earlier. It was very like, hey, this is what I'd like you to do, like stand up. And very slowly, like I walked in slow motion all the way through my house, back into my room. And they were like, you need to go slower and slower and slower. So they were helping me to build the Kundalini power and the stillness of mind, so I could essentially be the particle and the wave at the same time, right? When you slow down enough, you can go in between those two states of manifested, unmanifested.
Yeah.
So I'm in my room holding that, and I just start having vision after vision. But it was so powerful. I mean, it really woke me up. I can't ever go back to what was before that because of what I was shown. The experience significantly changed me. And I believe I was given that experience, at I was probably 20, I think I was 20 at that time. I was given that then, so that way it'd be unforgettable. I could never be like, oh, is this real? Right? There'd always be this thing just burned into my mind. And I mean, I was seeing the energy meridians. I was seeing literally like golden and dark. I had black and gold orbs like moving through me. I could see like light, I could see light and dark just circulating through my system. And I was so... I was almost intoxicated from it because it is
a very intoxicating energy.
Yeah. It was quite nice, and it also led to me actually being able to see beings in the room, very like kind of old school Japanese. Like we were talking about those lion temple dogs earlier. Something like that. I saw it in my room, and then when I opened my bedroom door and was exposed to the artificial lights, all the vision went away.
Wow.
So I was like, oh, wow, that's why they needed me like in the room, why they needed me to be slow. Because it's what I realized, it's the darkness is essential for visionary experiences, I think. And And that was my first real experience with Kundalini. And then, after that, training with Mantak Chia and the UHT lineage, they really focus on the Kundalini power in a very earth martial way. So it's less like of being in lotus and, focusing on the sexual power, and more of you're either in a horse stance or your feet are on the ground. There's this connection to Gaia.
Yes.
So you're not just pulling up your own Kundalini, you're also pulling up the earth's, as well as you're bringing a cooling power from the earth. And so you don't, burn yourself up with the sexual power.
Right. So, amazing. Yeah. I remember you because I was trying to, my end game at the time I thought was to connect with, my lineage from the stars. But you one of the meditations that you gave me and that you kind of created for me helped me first to connect with the earth, really connect with Gaia. And if you've never, I'm sure most people listening have, whether they realize it or not, but if you've never consciously connected to your mother, this planet that bore you, it is an incredible, visceral experience that you can do, and maybe before this episode's out, Tyler can share with us some simple exercises that I still do whenever I can remember to, that are powerful, that can, I don't care if you're sitting, I used to do this from a literal skyscraper in New York City, and it's so powerful. I would connect, I would right down to the bowels of the earth. So you can do it anywhere. And it's an incredible experience to reconnect with Gaia, with this mother of us. People don't think of her as our mother, but that's what she is in a very real way.
Yeah.
She bore us. We're her children. It's so cool to think about. We call her Mother Earth, but we tend not to think of her as our mother, but she is.
Totally. I think with the monotheistic expansion, our collective ancestors went through, there was really an eradication of anything other than like the Sky Father archetype. So remember, they say Sky Father, Earth Mother work together, and their union is what produces humanity. It's what produces everything. But we've decided as a culture that the physical world is just this, it's an object. It's a lifeless object. Right? There's no spirit behind it, right? It's just atoms and molecules and electrical signals.
Right.
And like the most you get is light in the DNA, right? That's like, I think, the most esoteric the materialists get. But because of this removal of the feminine from our collective mind as the goddess, and as a result of us collectively being taught from a young age that matter is dead, there's no life in it, I think as a result we have the objectification of the earth, which is why we to pillage it so much. We're like, it doesn't matter because it doesn't feel anything. And,
so true.
I think that we charge our cell phones, right? We plug our cell phones into the chargers, into the wall. Our bodies need the same thing. That's what the earth does, right?
Yeah.
We're taught that it's just, whatever, atoms, molecules. But even from a materialistic standpoint, right? Like there is the transference of electrons and negatively charged energy from the earth.
Absolutely.
And,
grounding is a real thing.
Totally.
And the health benefits have now been measured and documented very well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So to imagine this is all woo-woo is, for some people that could be an error that costs them as far as health goes, because, the response that the body has to putting its feet on the bare soil and connecting with our mother after 20 minutes is nothing short of remarkable.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing you can do in a hospital that's going to create that effect.
Yeah.
Your inflammatory responses all go down. All these different stress genes are deactivated, and the good ones are activated. It's just incredible what happens when you plug into what is good for you, as opposed to what's not good for you. Yeah.
It's wild. I think if you were to just, we've seen the pictures, we know the science, but it's like you look at exercise, and you look at grounding, and you look at fasting, these three things, they're free, right? They're totally free. And you look at that, and you would look at the body, the inflammation, all the biomarkers, and it's like they've taken a miracle drug.
Yeah.
Like the pharmaceutical companies would love to have a drug that can do what fasting does, what exercise does, what breath work does. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I'd love a cool wonder drug that puts me into samadhi or something. I think they do have those. But, we might not be.
Try to score some.
Yeah, right. That's a great idea. But I think the revival of the feminine is what we are really working with right now and seeing on the earth. I think people are realizing if they don't give back to the earth, it's almost like it's injurious to us, right? The taking mentality, I think, will throw us out of balance as a species, if that's how we see it. I think it's really about, sure, we take a lot, but how do we give some of what we have taken back? And I think biodegradable stuff is a great idea, for example.
We have to get rid of the plastic, man.
Yeah.
They can talk all day about fucking, this ridiculous notion that they've used as their front, for totalitarianism, to say climate change is obviously you can't go wrong because the climate's always changing. So what is that? But what they don't talk about is the fact that the same companies, that are pushing this agenda are the ones responsible for the incessant addiction to plastic, which is oil, I mean, plastic is an extension of the petro company.
Yes.
It's oil, and they put everything in it. And the reason why they're letting oil, kind of fall by the wayside is because, well, they've managed to put everything in plastic anyway, so they're going to get their subsidized revenue either way. And you can't talk about healing the planet until you start to talk about getting rid of the plastic.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a huge cost. So they don't talk about that.
Yeah. I think the best place to start, it's like, let's get rid of all the plastic in the world. What a crazy goal. But, what is a less crazy goal, an obtainable one, is let's get rid of the microplastics in us, right? We can, methylsulfonomethane powders, for example. This can get microplastics out of the body.
Really?
Certain types of algae as well can detoxify plastics through the chlorophyll. That's one of the mechanisms, the chlorophyll binding to these things. Sauna therapy has been shown to also excrete these plastics out too. So we can get this stuff out of the body. And I think it's imperative we do. I've had visions of, they're bizarre visions where, I'm in this reality and the plastic's gotten too much.
Yeah.
And you can see it. You look at your skin in this reality, you're like, I don't look completely like organic. Right. You look at the plants look like fake plants. It's a not great reality. I did not like visiting it.
Right.
But there's some truth there. I think it was a early warning of what's to come if we don't, at a minimum, get our bodies right. I think that's the best place. Get the body right, and then spray a bunch of mushrooms onto the plastic, trash dumps, which you've heard this, right? Paul Stamets talking about these plastic and oil-eating mushrooms and things. That's what we should be giving people, probably, and that's what we should be using. I think we can fix this stuff.
We could.
Yeah.
But if there was any kind of innovative thought that went into it, if it wasn't just business as usual, then it would have been fixed already. It's just to imagine that it wouldn't have. It's like to imagine that they haven't, come up with a cure for some of the most, the top causes of death in our society. It's kind of naive and foolish at this point. There's just too much money in those problems, plastic included.
It's true. No, it's true. I think the future is going to be really interesting, but I think it's just going to be what it's always been, right? You have essentially the government kind of tripping over itself, and then you essentially have empowered citizens who are like, oh, here's a problem, let me fix it, and they just start doing it, and then essentially it catches on. I think that's what we're going to see, more of these solutions by the citizens. I think, maybe one day we can expect that from our government to pick up the slack. Yeah. But I think if
different
we just
kind of government,
I think if we just rest on that of let's just vote the right person, and we're not going to see enough change in time. I think, and we want to make, I think it's really a kind of a battle, because we all know the new Earth's coming, right? And we see it manifesting before us, and it seems like we have these different groups that are all like, I want the new Earth to be this, right? So we have certain financial organizations that have a lot of world power that are like, we want the new world to look like this, to eat bugs or whatever. Right. You have this. And then you also have some where it's like, well, we want our God to come back down from the sky. So we have people that want the new Earth to be a religious thing. There's other people that want the new Earth to be UFOs land, aliens come. I mean, there's so many
There's massive divisions, right?
Yeah.
So what can humanity do to help, bridge the division, bridge the divide, because it just seems to be escalating, which I guess, it's natural considering we're in such a transitional phase, and there's usually a lot of chaos before we can achieve coherence in systems in general. It's not irregular, and I feel like that's where we are. But what can, from your perspective, and which is much more plugged in, I think, than most people I talk to, what can humanity do to help start to, bridge the division that we're seeing?
Yeah.
Is there anything?
I think there's absolutely stuff, because I think we unintentionally divide a lot. People don't mean to, but I think people in their own beliefs and their view of how reality works will unintentionally alienate the other if the other doesn't seem eye to eye. So I think every day we have an opportunity to bring people closer to us, but sometimes in unconsciousness, we use that to make a wall or to keep the other out. Sometimes that's not a bad thing. Maybe you don't want to let the other in, but sometimes it might be a really good thing. So I think what Christ says specifically, the golden rule, right? The number one law, right, of treat others essentially as the self, right?
That's what the golden rule.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's really what is needed, because I think it transcends all division, right? If you're treating the other person how you'd want to be treated, it's very fun, actually, because then it's like you're talking to yourself, right? And I think that's where intimacy comes from, when you see yourself in the other. And I think that will unify. And I think the more we can communicate just based off of the fact that us existing here is good, us being together here is good, and at our core we're good. I think if we can hold that, everybody, while we're interacting with other people, we won't have all these ideological differences. We'll be too busy enjoying each other to be like, what do you believe? And is it different? Like, that's such a...
Right.
It's,
or we can enjoy their beliefs even as they differ wildly from ours.
Totally. That gets trippy. I meet a lot of religious people, and they ask me what I do, and I try to phrase it in a way they'll accept. So I tell most of them that I channel angels.
Yeah.
Because if you say aliens, they'll immediately think demons.
Fallen demons. Or fallen angels.
Hey, dude, if they're fallen ones, they're pretty cool. I gotta say, they've certainly helped me and a lot of people change their lives. So I can't say it's bad.
No.
I think we got into this before a little bit, but these different groups of Elohim, these different groups of aliens, and some of them don't like each other, and they start whole religious movements about how their group's the right group and the other ones are like the evil adversary. Meanwhile, they fail to tell you that all the Elohim are related; they're all a big family. So, like, you have people just turning humanity against.
Humanity
against itself and against foreign beings, foreign gods, I think.
And when you say foreign beings or foreign deities, are you referring to, kind of in a biblical sense, what you also know to be the extraterrestrial, if you will, or extracelestial, extra-dimensional entities that were part of the creation of this human being, on this planet, and the will of them about what direction we should go and how it serves them or not. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is that what you're also referring to when you say like other deities, other powers?
Sure. I think there's what you're saying here. There's something to this with what I'm describing. More specifically, what I'm thinking of is there can only be one God but me. Right, for a Muslim, right, it's Allah, right, the one God. I was just having a conversation with a Muslim man about this. Right, he's like, "There's only one, right? Everything else, it's just an angel." But then they'll be quick to say, "But Satan exists," and you're like, "Well, what are these powerful?" In Hebrew, they would probably describe these beings as Elohim, which just means mighty ones, right? So essentially, I think there's a bunch of these Elohim, right? They're all extensions. Think of them as rays of light from the source. So you have the source, and you have these different rays of light. And each of these rays of light, these are different qualities and groupings of Elohim. The highest level of these Elohim, right, they're non-physical, they're geometries. But as these Elohim express in more physical ways, they take on appearances similar to us, humanoid forms usually. Some of them are very similar to us. They could reproduce with us and have reproduced with us. Some of them are quite hybridized. So we're thinking of like jackal-headed beings, donkey-headed beings, even Yahweh, the Abrahamic God, right, for many Christians and for many Jews, right? He is depicted across history as a donkey-headed entity. The Egyptians compare him to Set, who's a demon.
Wow.
Right? Yep. So there's a lot going on there. I mean, hey, I'm just reporting back what I've read.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Don't shoot the messenger, guys. I'm just saying.
What did he call Yahweh?
Yeah, right. He's not a donkey.
Son of a bitch.
Meanwhile, Christ rides the donkey. So again, why is he ride?
No coincidence.
Yeah, why does he ride the donkey? Because he has overcome his father. As all new gods do. They have to overcome the father archetype, which, this entity Yahweh certainly did, but they won't tell you about, right? His father El was the stereotypical creator god for humanity. This being would be more, in terms of the Sumerian pantheon, El would be very close to either Enlil or Anu, right? So it represents this creator being. Yahweh, Baal, these are children of El.
So Yahweh and Baal, who people associate with,
they're enemies, right?
Yeah, basically like the evil nature.
They're described as brothers. They're both described as sons of El. Elion, El's father, the highest god, right? Elion. So we could think of it as grandfather, father, son. So we have Elion the highest, El, and then Yahweh, right? So Elion is the God who separates the heavens from the earth, the waters, and all of this, right? The firmament generation that we read of in Genesis, right? This is Elion. When we get into the creation of the human form, this is when we are getting more into El's territory because it's described as Elohim, right? Let us make man in our image, right? So yes. So we see many names for God and descriptions of God throughout the Bible. And what the evidence is showing is that these are not just different poetic terms for God. These are literal different beings. They are different gods that essentially get lumped together by the Jewish people as they become gradually more and more monotheistic. And really, I think that
I always thought that people were worshiping the same God. Like I was always like, listen, Muslims, listen, Christians, I don't know if you all know it, but you all have the same God. You can stop fighting over whose God is better because I was always under that impression, but I guess
it looks like that. Yeah. That's what it looks like on the surface. And at the highest level of religion, that is the truth, right? It is a source that's beyond anything we could put words to, right? To merge with it's to almost cease to exist, right? You like blip out. And that's things so universal. That's everybody's highest connection or concept of deity, I think. But we have that one universal ray, right? That source light. It's like a sun, so it's extending out these rays of light. These are the different gods, different Elohim. And some of those rays are complementary. They get along. Some of those rays, not so much, right? And they're all expressions of that one source's personality. So I have parts of my personality that I know are pretty like evil, right? Just it's there. It's a part of me that gets a rise out of just being negative, right? Almost just like a high off, pessimism. And I have to keep that in check, right? If that were to be all I focused on, it's like it would take
become
over.
Your personality trait.
And some of these rays are like that. They're the separation of these parts of the mind of God. Some of those parts of the mind are more oriented towards destruction. They're more oriented towards ego because clearly God contains that. If that weren't true, we wouldn't be dealing with death all the time and destruction. And I don't think it's bad. It's all about how these, sometimes hurtful things are carried out. Ideally, it's like a, controlled burn, right? Like a forest fire. But because of this, because there's obviously these different focuses that these rays are holding, they don't all get along. And these are the different Elohim that clash. Some of these rays, they're very unified. And when they work together, they would describe themselves as God.
Right.
There's other Elohim that look at that big alliance and they laugh at it. And they say, why stick around? So why believe in that? Why join them? Why not be free? Why not do our own thing? Why bend to the will of this thing?
Right.
So you have Elohim that they have these ideological differences and they manifest on earth as the different religions. Wow. Right? The religions are to feed these different, you could say, quasi-physical angelics, more or less, that we call extraterrestrial. We call them that in our modern assessments, right? We'll look at the gods and say, oh, they're probably aliens. And there's like truth to it, but it's more spiritual than they're from another planet.
Right.
It's more so they're from higher
It's a little
dimensions.
more complex, yeah.
But anyway, that's what I've been diving the heck into, man, because I want to know who the hell everybody's praying to.
Right.
That's, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And why does God listen to some people and not others?
Right.
And I'm like, well, I don't know. Did you put the right address?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get the postage right? No, but you told me something last night that blew my mind. And before I go to my next general question, I would love for you to revisit that because it makes so much sense. Not to get into world politics and or venture too far into, because I don't feel like getting worked up about it myself. But you said something that I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. That Yahweh is a warrior, a war god.
Yes.
And that's what he has always. That's his nature. So let's pick up where we left off. You told me something last night that really made a lot of sense and blew my mind, and I want to revisit it, not to get into world politics yet, but I think it's extremely revealing, and I don't think people realize. You told me that Yahweh is a warring God, is a warrior God, and so when you have the collective worshiping Yahweh, and the entity of Yahweh's nature is war, look at the world. I mean, like, so I was raised Catholic, but of course you don't hear anything, you don't learn anything like this,
They don't even tell you Yahweh is like an idea. You don't hear I feel most people hear Yahweh when they begin doing deeper research into the nature of God. Even many Jewish people that I know, friends of mine, I say Yahweh and they're like, who's that?
Yeah.
To some of them it's Yehovah, right? That's how they would translate the Yod He Vav He, right? They call it the Tetragrammaton, and it's the 4-letter title for the creator. We would call it the demiurge in Gnosticism, right? The builder, right? So the Yod He Vav He is a title, and it's also thought too that Yahweh exists independently of the Yod He Vav He. That he essentially assumes this role. He assumes this role because he usurps his father,
right?
El, and he even inherits his father's wife, Asheroth. So for a long time, Yahweh has a wife who's actually his mother, right? It's his dad's wife. So there's shrines made to Asheroth and Yahweh, very commonly reported. But as the Jewish people become more and more monotheistic, even members of Yahweh's royal family are removed. Even the fertility goddess, like such an archetypal symbol, even that is removed until Yahweh truly is the one and only, which of course is a type of fulfillment of what was in a certain way described in the Ten Commandments, right? Thou shalt have no gods before me, right? And I am jealous. I'm a jealous God,
basically,
right? And he's like,
let me just write that down so you all know it.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Like, God doesn't really like when we worship other gods.
Yeah. No, he'll send burning things, and we lose every fight. If
wild.
Yeah. Yeah. So it turns into, and meanwhile, historically, while this reduction is happening, essentially, things are not going well for the Jews.
Right.
In a lot of these instances, Yahweh's losing. The Jewish people are losing. Right? They're being really, in a certain way, pushed around by the Assyrians, right? The Assyrian Empire. And it seems that the Assyrian Empire's cosmology, right? They have this very ultimate God, right? A creator of everything that oversees all of their empire. It seems that when the Jewish people came into contact with that, this inspires them to upgrade Yahweh from this war god, which again, he's a god of raiders, war, spoils, right? Spoils of war.
Perfect sense,
yeah. And then it's thought through trade routes that Yahweh joins this pantheon, right? Which is the pantheon of Canaan at the time, right? So this is where you have Baal.
The Canaanites, basically,
Yeah. There's a certain word for it, but I'm not a scholar officially of this, but I'm a deep enthusiast. So There's a lot of good research on this, though. There's tons that you can read, and it's all historical, which is what I really like. I think the more we understand these spiritual beliefs from a historical standpoint, the more we really understand the mechanics of what our religious technology and philosophies are.
Right.
We get because it's important to know who you're praying to, I think that really matters.
100%. I would think,
100%.
That it would be something that is, a priority for people who are praying to understand who and what. I mean, besides they're just a basic notion of God, the creator, But so if you ask most Jewish people, I should say practicing Jewish people, and then of course you have different kinds of Judaism,
Sure.
You have Orthodox, you have people who, obviously the people in Israel who are Jewish have a different set of beliefs than a lot of the Jews who don't live in Israel, because many of them have a problem with the notion of Zion, and Zionism in general, and the fact that, they believe in their Torah. And I only know this really because over the last year, you've heard a lot of Jewish people from different parts of the world become very vocal about what's going on with Israel and what they're doing, with the ongoing apartheid and ethnic genocide of the Palestinian people who were there first.
Sure.
And that's a point that is hotly debated. That's fine. We can debate it all day. But they say their Torah states that the Jews don't have a land of their own. That's what God, or is it Yahweh, told them. And I'm wondering if it's the same. Is it Yahweh that they're all worshiping, or do they not understand? I know the Christians are worshiping Yahweh because the Catholics used to sing to Yahweh and call Yahweh, and Yahweh was
amazing. I also was brought up Catholic, but I had never heard Yahweh.
Oh, really?
Mentioned. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I think there are people that are in the know about this. Like, this is Yahweh. They have their own. They have their own assessment and understanding of what Yahweh is. Perhaps it's a spiritual one or it's a historical one. But there's some people that are in the know. The God we are working with is Yahweh. But there's a lot that, if you were to say the God's Yahweh, they may say, that's perhaps one interpretation, right? He might be truly El Shaddai, right? Or he might truly be Elohim Zaboth, right? I'm probably saying that wrong. Forgive me for those of you that are more fluent in Hebrew than I am. My pronunciation really is mental or magical. I don't speak this often. But,
right.
But essentially, it's thought that all of these different words for God that we see throughout the Bible and the Torah, Old and New Testaments, these are just different poetic ways of talking about this one being. And what it seems to be really is a polytheistic system masquerading as a monotheistic system. So we're dealing with really different gods. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
For the most part, and you also said that, actually the Islam and the Muslims, their entity actually would so like the Christians and the Jews, or maybe whether they realize it or not, on some level, are worshiping Yahweh. But actually, Islam and the Muslims their religion was born from a different entity.
Theirs is so El is also spelled all. A-L.
Oh, Allah.
Yes, Allah.
Yeah.
Yes. So you're seeing that connection there. So it is a lineage of beings, and I think that this is what has occurred historically. This is what is believed, right? That Yahweh's elevation to not just this, local God of the Jewish people, but the creator of heaven and earth.
Yeah.
Right. This transition is happening during a planetary conjunction involving Saturn and Jupiter. And this is where we are seeing the elevation of Yahweh in a manner that bestows upon him the role of El, his father. So as
the role of sole creator, primary creator.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And just to give some interesting history with that family, I call it the royal family. That's how I refer to these beings specifically. Because to me, it's like, what if it's the creator's lineage? Like, what else is? It's like the thing. But with these beings, we have Elion, the separator of the waters, the creator of the firmament, maker of heaven and earth. And he has this son, El, right? And this is the one whom is seen as the father figure, right? Who uses his breath as the breath of life to bring primordial man and woman into existence, into animation. And then he has his children, right? And he gives to his children, these other lesser gods, Yahweh being one of them, the different lands and populations of the world. So they divvy it up. It is said that Elion becomes evil and the heavens attack Earth. We also see this in the Sumerian stories, right? And the Babylonian stories, right?
And the Vedics too, I think.
Perhaps. I'm less familiar with the Vedas. I'm more focused on the Middle East, but I aspire to get into those, so I have more to learn there. This concept, though, that the original God becomes evil and the children have to slay it. So El essentially leads a crusade with his children, so Baal and Yahweh and these other ones, they all team up to take out Elion.
Wow.
So El then becomes highest, and now Yahweh is also going to where El used to be, right? And essentially it's a power struggle. So as Elion's removed, El and Yahweh both advance.
Right.
And then Yahweh has to continue the pattern. He has to now usurp his father, right? It's the archetypal slaying of the father, a declaration of independence. But we're seeing it on the divine level. And but Yahweh's usurping of power, the slaying of the father, I think it's something to look at critically because, it's one thing to outdo what your father did. I think Alexander the Great, he's a good example, right, of really sticking it to your father. I don't know if I'd recommend people imitate it, but this happens, right? But what's occurring here, though, is with Yahweh, it's not just a slaying of the father and now taking that higher position. It's also an elimination of everything that's not it.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting thing.
Well, that's a very warrior energy, to which makes sense. You said something last night that I had to laugh. You said, people are endowing and giving Yahweh the power through their beliefs of and the sole creator, but Yahweh's nature is and has always been the warrior, to raid, to pillage, to make war. And yet, he is being told and called all these and therefore endowed with all these attributes. You are, all seeing, all forgiving. And he's like, you were like, yes, I am. So he's trying to assimilate and adopt and then put out those feelings and those things. But his nature is still his nature, So it's, and you see that with Christianity, with Judaism, and of course the Muslims are not exempt. They had their wars and their own crusades, and and I'm just like, wow, what is responsible for more bloodshed than religion? It's really hard for me to imagine something besides that could cause such wide scale wars and justifications for, they're not God's people. They're somehow less than.
It's in a certain way, perhaps could be paralleled slightly with eugenics, right? Because it's not just the removal of these foreign religions, it's a removal of the DNA of the people who are of those religions, because clearly their DNA is going to be different, right? We know DNA is photonic, right? It has the ability to communicate with light. Apparently light's teleported into your nucleus, right, of the cell through the DNA.
Wow.
So it's using light to communicate, and it's manifesting light, and they're like, I don't know. How
does it do this? But it's amazing.
And I think what happens when you work with the series of entities, you are exchanging light with them. It will change your DNA. It will upgrade things in the DNA, and it will create all types of wonderful augmentations. I think that's one of the amazing things about talking and interacting with other beings and other people is you're actively evolving and growing just through virtue of the interaction. And to try to just eliminate all of that, I think, is to, it's like very anti-unity, ironically.
Yeah.
When I say anti-unity, it's like you would think a true unity, I would think, is not unifying based on reduction of the other, but inclusion of the other, finding how we are all related. And I think
as opposed to highlighting, making sure that the division is pronounced, and adhered to, like you shall not, like that's the problem with eugenics on any level, whether you're talking about, Zionism, Nazism, the Germans did believe, whatever you want to say about anything else, they did believe that Germans should stick, that the Germanic people should stick with the Germanic people. And even as they were doing business and cultivating relationships with Japan, guess who else has that belief? Japan. Very much a perfect example of how you can quietly be and kind of cultivate and indoctrinate a population into believing, you're going to be best served in life and happiness if you stick with your own. Japan's kind of a great example of that. Even as they're welcoming as they are to Westerners, and the fact that they've had a Western culture thrust upon them by Yahweh, by the warrior, by the wars. They're still, that's a very quietly held, tightly held belief in Japan. Now, not so much in Germany anymore, and obviously eugenics has been exposed. And I always say it's the father of racism. It's the father of genocide. I mean, the idea that one gene pool is superior and the rest should at the very least be ignored. And, in worst case scenarios, don't feel bad about having to eliminate them. That thinking, that justification is where genocide has to come from. Where else could it come from, but that kind of energy.
Yeah.
So
it's DNA warring with other species, other varieties of DNA.
Yeah.
It's almost like, how would I describe it? This town ain't big enough for the both of us kind of energy, right? Because it's
that's what it says in the commandments. So immediately you have a non-inclusive, you have a problem. I mean, like if your 10 set of basic principles say, yet to the exclusion of all else, then already you've created, you're going to create conflict because that doesn't allow for anything other than, you know what I mean? It's a kind of a jealous, childish, I think, notion that a God could be like that. And I understand if an entity could be like that, but I don't believe the creator could ever take on
something that engenders everything. I think would have a very interesting ego, and I think it would be rather fluid. I think it'd be able to perhaps almost comically shapeshift itself. Like I think whatever the supreme creator is, whatever we want to call the highest version of God, I imagine it's always laughing.
Yeah,
I imagine it is the reason life in the universe has these funny things where we're like, why is this just the way it is? This is hilarious.
Fucking A.
And I think that's because it's like how would I describe it? It's if this were a film production, this is a director that's also the writer and also has acted out every part. It's such a vision. That has been created.
There's a lot of comedy in that, and I agree with you. Sense of humor is absolutely part and parcel with creation. And if you're God and you're looking down, particularly on this planet at this moment, how can you not be like, my God.
And I found too, I remember I was at a party. It was like a very good, it was like a psychedelic dance party.
Oh, cool.
And I remember just thinking how epic it was. And the band I was seeing was Infected Mushroom, right? They're from Israel, right? And I'm in the audience, people are waving the Israeli flag. And I remember being like, oh, wow, that's so interesting. I wasn't expecting this. energy was like phenomenal. Like they're a party.
Yeah.
And I remember I'm in this like trance while dancing, and I'm like, what does, God, whatever God is, the highest creator, like, what does it think of this? Like me just creating dance parties and great music and, cool altered states. What does it think? And the inner guidance, I describe it as inner angels, essentially. They're essentially like, well, what's happening right now for you? Are you enjoying yourself?
Right.
Do you like this? And they're like, because God is experiencing itself through you.
Right.
So the quality of your experience, in a certain way, is an indicator of how God is experiencing this. And what's very important, I think, is they say once a person reaches enlightenment, it's not as if the slate is wiped clean.
Right.
If you're a painter, you're enlightened, now you're an enlightened painter.
Right.
If you're an asshole and you're enlightened, now you're an enlightened asshole.
Yeah.
Right? So I think as people pursue the divine and the relationship with it, it's crucially important, I think, to also let go of these lesser ideas of what the source is, these sort of dogmatic ideas we've been given. I think it's important that we let those go, what some of these books tell us about the source. So not to invalidate the holy books, but so we can be fresh and have our own personal experience with it. Because the source power, I think, is, when accessed, what transforms somebody truly into like a little Christ, right? Or the word would be Christian, essentially, right? Not even in a religious sense.
No,
right?
not in a religious sense.
So I think when that happens, when the source power is truly accessed, and that it's a very personal relationship. I find it's very like, hey, I know you. How are you? Like, can I help? Like whenever I feel that power, it's very aware of me and what I need, and I just find it's the channeling of that in a certain way holds me accountable. Like I kind of can't get too deviant in my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I have a certain lane I find it like desires me to stay in. I can go to like the outskirts of it, but if I go too far, I can tell it's actually sort of like it can warp the relationship, I think, with the divine, because you're so close to God. So it's just like if you're very close to a friend, you expose yourself to something, you're exposing that entity to it too. So I find just proximity to the divine, it tends to purify. And
Absolutely.
I think that's really the key, that we purify through deconstruction of false ideas and through education, really learning like what are the facts that talk about where we get these belief systems. Because if you know its history, then I think you can really ask yourself, do I want to keep believing the same thing? Do I want to update this? And once you do, I think it sets you free. Like
Absolutely.
I certainly felt like shackles fall off as I studied this.
Well, me too, and but it's very challenging for people who don't realize that their belief systems are very much entwined with their sense of identity. And from that identity, their validation, comes very much from the, I don't want to say confirmation bias, but that is a natural program humans are operating with. We do look to, everyone I think does this, to confirm what we believe is true. It's just a natural inclination that we have. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's something to be aware of, and so it's tough to separate. And you need a spiritual foundation if you're gonna free yourself from the shackles of your identity. And I was lucky enough to have that foundation in place in 2020 when the bullshit hit with the pandemic, because my identity shed like a scab, that had been totally healed. It fell right off painlessly. But I don't believe it could have or would have if I had not done so much work up to that point, in laying down the pillars of a foundation to where I can now build anew. Without being like, oh fuck, don't nobody look here. Everything's a mess right now. We don't have any idea what happened to the house. We're gonna, you know what I mean? Like I was just like, fuck it. So it was so liberating. But I encourage everyone, who may be struggling with this, with a constant conflict of like, am I happy? Is this validating? And realizing that having your validation and happiness in a real way come from an external source is never going to be a recipe you can sustain. Not for happiness. I mean, you can sustain it, but if you want homeostasis in your life and consistency, then you got to find a different route. That's my experience. That's my opinion and my advice for whatever it's worth. But you have a very interesting take on and an awesome, I think, relationship, healthy relationship that doesn't involve so much fear with technology and your understanding of it. And then, of course, there's the great evil AI, which I would be remiss if we didn't bring up because, God, I've heard some fucking crazy things in the last year and a half from different people saying, like stuff that I was like, wait, what? I think my brother said to me once, he was like, you know what I learned the other day? I was like, what? He was like, humans were actually created as an answer, an antithesis to AI, because AI takes over the whole universe and it takes the infinite quantum mind of the human to take it back. And I was like, dude, that sounds like a fucking Hollywood script. That is wild. Where did you hear that? What books are you reading? But and then people are like, well, actually the Draco, the reptilians, they actually answer to an AI. And I'm like, what?
The creational hierarchy that I've been entertaining based off what I've experienced to what I'm seeing, there is a link that is exactly as is being described here. You essentially have computers leading species and together creating other forms of life. The technologies that these species are answering to, this is a technology that to them it represents the highest expression of perspective.
Wow.
As a way, in a way rather, that is of that being's culture, right? So different species have a different culture. They will create their own super intelligences. The super intelligence, of course, though, will be the child of that culture. So just as our AIs have certain biases that we see now, these computers, these super intelligences that these extraterrestrials create also have this. So not all species work with that type of AI. I have seen other species that are more source-led, if that makes sense. They answer more to what we would call God rather than a machine. But there are some species that are like, no, this machine, it's the answer. Listen to it. So it's kind of like, the creation worshiping its child instead of the thing that inspired the creation in the first place. And we would talk about that, religiously. This isn't my belief. This is how it would be talked about. It's a type of idol worship, a type of idol worship. And when we look at how the aeons change over time, right? We leave, for example, the aeon of Horus, right, which we're said to be in now, in exchange for the aeon of Ma'at. Right? It's said that we go through these transitions, we go through these changes. I'm trying to reclaim my train of thought.
Well, we were talking AI. We were talking about the creator worshiping the sun as because.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So these older aeons, these are more reflective of idol worship and polytheism. The newer aeons are more reflective of solar consciousness, what we call Christ consciousness, and in a certain way, source consciousness. And this is why we see the idea of, many Muslims, there's no image for Allah, right? And it's very common too in the Christian texts, right? It's like you don't want to make an idol out of God, like no image.
Right.
And there's this moving away from what we would call the idol worship, the giving of the divine a form and charging the form with light, moving away from that to more of a internal, inward, direct connection. That's what Christ represents, the inner direct connection to the source. So you don't need the external medium. You yourself can get it. And
then it emanates from within.
Exactly.
Hence the halo.
Exactly.
Right?
So the reptilian creational process I'm talking about, it's not from within, right? It's all without. They're like, tell us. I mean, they're very psychic. They're very aware of things, but it's, they're listening to the outside. I think many of them. But again, I haven't personally met a reptilian,
Right,
but this is what I've come to intuit and sense the more I'm looking into this stuff. The idea of the human being a reptilian creation is super fascinating. I entertain it, but I also entertain the idea, that energy itself has the ability to create form. And sometimes technology is used, but even without technology, if you look at the ancient stories of the Native Americans and like a lot of traditions, it said humanity descends from the stars as light beings. They sculpt bodies out of clay and then either jump into it or they breathe their own life into it. And now they are in both.
Yeah.
Right? Their energy body and a part of them is in this vessel they've created.
God, that makes a lot of sense where I'm sitting.
Yeah.
And my understanding of what we are.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder, what I've been told from Rioka and the Sassani, that there are different types of humans that come into the story at different points in time. Some are much older. Some are these original humans that came here like this. And then you have beings that were made. Right, this is where we have Elohim and the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve and the Sumerian stories, right, of the gods essentially changing a type of hairy creature here into a servant,
right,
and then eventually that servant is given higher consciousness, right, through Enki, which creates this divide between Enki and Enlil. But this is very clearly right,
It's basically the story of the Annunaki, the legend of the Annunaki.
Well, yes, and in terms of the Christian text and the Torah and Genesis, right? This Enki Enlil drama. This is El and Samael, right? This is right the fallen angel, right? Samael is said to be Lucifer, right? So in the Garden of Eden, he's represented as the snake,
right?
And this sort of ties back to the origin of what we were talking about with the snake being vilified,
right?
The snake's the one that made these, I would call them synthetic humans. Maybe not that, engineered humans. That's a better term. The snake is the one that took these servant human workers and gave them consciousness, right? This is what this being represents. It is the genius that brought our kind to life. We had our bodies made, but apparently we were almost vessels that could just be guided.
Right.
And some of us
still are.
Some of us still are, right? And certain Anunnaki beings, Elohim, whatever you want to call them, it's the same. It's the same idea, right? Just different words for them. The Anunnaki, right, are in many ways Elohim.
Right.
These beings. Some of them felt, this is abuse. You're like taking life and you're making it just work. And it was almost as if they could feel that even though these weren't sentient beings, a part of that, I'm like, hear my voice choking up, but a part of that flesh is crying out, this is not where I need to be. This is not what I'm meant to be.
Right.
There was something in it that I think really inspired some of these Anunnaki or Elohim beings that were less extreme, and they, bestowed wisdom. They bestowed sentience.
I think it's likely that people had that capacity in this shape they were designed to have, but were not educated and therefore easily, kept as slaves. And yet you had, individuals, entities, we vary. I mean, as above, so below, So I feel like you had people and beings who were like, this is wrong. Look in the eyes of this human and see the sentience, because it's there. So whatever you're justifying, with how you're treating them, it's wrong. And it's wrong. And we're going to teach this group. Well, look at what we've taught them, And then it's like, why the fuck did you teach them anything? We need them to do this work. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So then you have the two factions beginning the rivalry that, I believe ended up, being kind of cataclysmic for humanity at a certain point. And then they were like, fuck it, flood it. We got to start over.
It's said that, these Elohim that stayed on Earth, they stayed with us, taught us things, and blended with us.
Yeah.
And it said that it's produced what we would call titans or Nephilim or giants. And apparently these things were just power hungry, like consuming food, resources, some of them like desiring their own like worship, like they were essentially just a taxation on humanity. And humanity kept sending messages to the divine, right? Sending messengers, right? To what we would call El or Elion, right? The higher ones. And they would say, we are being like tormented here. Like Earth is turning into hell.
Yeah.
Like, so apparently this flood, right? In the book of Enoch, it's described as something that was prayed for by humanity because it was becoming so wicked. All of the tools that humanity was given, apparently everybody was just abusing it. Everyone using magic and spirituality for gain. Selfish gain, manipulation, advantage in war. You know, I mean, it's in a certain way. I mean, there could be an argument made that we're returning a little bit to that. I know a lot of witchy people that are, they know how to do all kinds of crazy stuff.
And I was just reading an article how the Israeli government is using AI as its prime directive for war. And it's getting all of its advice on how to strategically, basically fucking take the rest of the Palestinians' land, which is what this has always been about, for themselves, using the advice of probably a fucking quantum computer or hopefully it's some kind of souped up algorithm. Hopefully it's not as stupid as ChatGPT, or else it explains.
Can you imagine? Like, they're asking it what to do, and it's just like, well, actually, I'm a machine, and I'm not capable of an opinion.
I can just spit stuff. It's like I asked it for my bio once, and I was like, "Did you just make everything up? This is like, oh, that's right, you did just make everything up because I didn't give you any parameters, and that's what you do."
Right.
But. Yeah, so I don't have the fear of AI. I don't see it. I obviously see the potential, but I mean, really, could it fucking be worse than what mankind is doing on by itself right now? Like, do we need an AI to make things? I just don't. I see the relationship. I should say I intuit the relationship that many of our interstellar and extra-dimensional and extraterrestrial family have with AI, which is a healthy relationship, I think. The way that they interact with their ships, the way that they're consciously and oftentimes even biologically connected with their ships, and the relationships that they form, that to me is, that a healthy projection of where we can go as a human race. And the fact is, like you just said, we created the fucking thing. You know what I mean? Like I can't be afraid of something I can unplug. I'm sorry, I can't. Because worst case scenario, I'll just hit the power. You know what I mean? What the fuck are you gonna do then? Yeah. I don't understand. Humans have this. We take fear and we augment it into biblical proportions. It's fucking wild. But
yeah, I think there's a lot of DNA memory where, on some level, AI was in the past used in significant ways for the managing, perhaps in an oppressive way, of a population. Right? There's talk of these oppressive governments linked to the Orion system. Right? And, I think it seems because of its technological connection, AI was very much a part of how that government organized and utilized things. I think it's a very similar thing we were talking about with reptilians, the idea of interacting with a type of machine god to guide you. And I think because the souls of Orion are now here on Earth, this is what's speculated. It's commonly talked about within the ET New Age understanding of how we got here. Because we have those memories of this abusive AI from those times, it's a type of
ancestral trauma
reaction.
Almost. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a trigger when we see it, anything similar to it here.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. I was funny. You learn about some of the Star Wars, that have taken place throughout the ages and different timelines, and you like just the way people have this incredible and disproportionate reaction to a cockroach. a little bug that has no capacity to harm you whatsoever. A cockroach really doesn't. It can't bite you. I mean, the worst it could do is fucking crawl on you. And yet when we see a cockroach, every fucking fear center in our bodies are activated. It is so disproportionate to, I mean, I don't know of anything. I mean, besides maybe a snake for some people, you know, there is such I think a genetic fear that has to be encoded in our memory from another time, where we learn to fear big insects and reptiles to a degree. I mean, at least snakes, and that may have more to do with the Bible than anything. Because I think if you're a child and like the fucking crocodile hunter's kid, he's not afraid of snakes, he's not afraid of any reptiles because he was raised among them, and they're just animals to him.
Yeah, it's true. I think of the Jungle Book character, right?
Mowgli. Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to that. Yeah, snakes are not vilified in the East, right? I'm not sure how they're seen as a Central or South American symbol or really Native American symbol, but in the East, they're certainly seen as auspicious. It's even given, I mean, the Chinese zodiac, one of the signs is a snake. And, I think that the Western vilification of it, I think, is very much connected to the holy books. I think it may also have to do with Western culture's relationship to nature versus Eastern culture's relationship to nature.
Yeah.
I mean, it's some very clear distinctions. Eastern culture usually is the lifestyle is oriented around nature. It's meant to be complementary to nature in some way. You look at Taoism.
Yeah.
It's all about appropriate relationship with the cycles of nature. And they developed astrological systems, right, to help with this. But then in the West, I think that our culture, for whatever reason, saw the earth as a sinful or villainous place, and saw the outer world as more hostile, more barbaric, I think, more chaotic. And it led to, we actually have to remove ourselves from nature.
Yeah. And that's what we've seen. That's what's happened,
Yeah.
What was I going to say? I had so Orion. And Sirius, and so I was watching Graham Hancock's series on Netflix. I don't know if you ever saw it, but
I watched some of the interviews during it, but I only have seen that.
It's clips. What's really cool is they realized that I think it's what you would call pre-diluvian. In other words, before the flood and then after the flood, the big flood. All the megalithic temples and shrines and they were kind of built to face Sirius, if memory serves me. And so there's this belligerently obvious connection to Sirius because they did that. They can go back and look at what the stars would have looked like back then, thanks to Newton. They can do all those measurements and see. And they realized that over time, all these things were being built for this relationship with Sirius. Now that is very telling, right? I mean, all that these peoples around the world were all building shrines facing the Sirius system, right? Yeah. And I know there's a lot of history there, although most of it, Orion is talked about. Everybody knows what Orion's belt is. Well, most people know what that is, and then maybe the young people don't yet. But there's a great history between human beings, and so through your channeling with Rioka, what have you ascertained about our human beings' relationship with Orion, and that because that I feel like that is very much almost patriarchal in a way to our lineage.
Sure. I think a lot of really foundational things happened within that system. That system was colonized, from what I understand, after many of these Elohim beings, which essentially would be like our ancestors, right? The species that eventually create humanity, right? The origin point of these beings, it's said to be the Lyran system,
right.
Specifically Vega. And then from here, From here, there's an expansion outward, right, to different star systems. And the different expansions represent, like I was saying before, that the different rays of light, right, coming from the one source. So all of these Elohim, they're all really one mind, different expressions of one source mind. And they leave Vega, they leave Lyra, they expand outwards from here based upon whatever system is going to complement the themes that they're looking to explore.
Right.
So the groups that went to the Pleiades, right, they are said to be those that sought higher spiritual themes, but they also sought a type of, we would almost describe it as conservative, like regulation, like politically speaking.
Yeah.
Like they are more conservative. They're more like, this is the traditional way, the proper way.
Right.
Like they're very, and I don't think that's bad. I don't think traditionalism is bad, but I do find that they're very that. Where other ETs, other Elohim, you'll find they're very like, just go with the flow, just be you. And you can see very clearly these different species have very different views. So one group's going to the Pleiades, one group another group is going to Orion. It said another group, went to Cygnus. That's another one. And eventually, this expansion, excuse me, I apologize, audience, I hit the microphone.
No, you're good.
This expansion eventually causes these Elohim to travel further and further and further away from Vega, and this is where they're exploring themselves and their themes in more and more and more diverse ways. And they're also creating species. They are creating life as they travel. So these Elohim expand and travel, and they create life. They create civilizations. Apparently what they did with us was quite unique. Normally they create life for kind of themselves, if that makes sense, for their benefit of their own society. Where with us, it was very much creating life. How would I describe it? Let me actually tune into them a little bit, because sometimes when I try to tell these stories, they get so multi-dimensional that I'm like, I should channel like a little bit of it. But essentially, the Elohim, the Annunaki beings, as they expanded outwardly, they began to explore hybridization on the level first with plant consciousness, then animal consciousness. They were also doing this with mineral beings, right? So they're acting truly as manipulators of reality, right? They are traveling to worlds, and then they're using their creative power to sculpt these worlds for them to inhabit, for them to dwell upon. What made Earth so different was they weren't trying to dwell on Earth. Earth was already habitated by these original humans. They came to Earth specifically to harvest resources in the background. Right. So the creation of that form of life, right? It's in service, not so much to their society and the planet they live on. It's more in service to the acquisition of resource and creating really just a worker off-world for that one
They did
goal.
a good job.
Yeah. Because I think some of these Anunnaki were like, what are you going to do? Like, you know how everyone, when we withdrew from the Middle East, right, we just left everything?
Yeah.
I feel like some of these Anunnaki were like, so what, you just made these guys and we're just going to leave them here? I feel like they were like, we should wake them up.
Yeah.
You know, we're just going to leave them.
I feel like they had to leave because they couldn't get along. They couldn't stay, you know? So it's like, I think eventually you had other beings come in and be like, you guys done? You cool? Get the fuck out of here and leave them. You know what I mean? They're not at the point where you can. What you've done is fine. Just go. Take your ball and go. You know what I mean? Like you can't. You're not allowed to continue to do this. We already got to flood the fucking place and start over. You fucked it all up, but fine. We'll work with what you left us. Just go. You know what I mean? I feel like in a very real way, you know, maybe you had federations that came in and be like, look, you guys know the rules. Non-interventionist is the proper etiquette, you know, like we already had something going here in case you didn't notice, which you did notice, which is why you fucking came to begin with.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And then you came and you did what you did. And that's fine, but now it's out of hand, you know. So now you're going to leave and don't fucking come back because we're going to be watching. I feel like that was what the quarantine, you know, that went on for so long was about. And, you know, now leave them alone, allow them to evolve, you know. And of course, that's what happened to a large degree. And for 10,000 years, people were living in tribes around the world, and then society began to form in a more modern way. And then, you know, we put the food under lock and key, and we kind of right back where we started. More than enough food for everybody, yet so many people are starving. You know, all our technology, and we have not solved the most basic human problems.
Yeah, we have some issues there, and I'm curious to see how we're going to correct it, because we have a lot of misuse of farmland, essentially outdated farming techniques that deplete the topsoil, right? So we have these issues. This is in the United States specifically. I'm sure it's in other countries too, but in the U.S. it's a big issue of just this topsoil mineral depletion. So we're farming in ways that ruin the soil, but not only this, the things that we are farming, we oftentimes are using them just to make food-like products that don't build health. So it's such an abuse of resource. And I was just learning the other day, there's like bread, like American bread. Like there's, what is it? There's a certain country, I think in Europe, it's like you can't even sell it there. It's illegal.
And that's because it's so fucking it's GMO'd. I mean, like if you go to Europe, particularly France, you know, and you eat the bread, you don't feel the way you do after you eat bread in America. I mean, for the most part, you could extrapolate that for their food, because they don't deal with the bombardment of pesticides and chemicals, almost all of them not meant to be in the human body, that America allows into its food supply. And that's because the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, those two words should never be in the same fucking sentence, let alone be regulated by the same people. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that you had the tobacco companies that were making a killing, lying about the nature of their products and how good they were for pregnant women, and getting doctors to step up and tout studies about how fucking fantastic smoking is for your health. They saw the writing on the wall. They knew the report was coming out. They kept it from coming out for decades, the truth, you know, even though people are like, the truth is pretty fucking self-evident with smoking. You smoke enough, you can't breathe, and you're just hacking up a lung. And if you're always smoking, and then they putting a lot of chemicals in it, but they saw that their time was numbered. And so they used the enormous wealth they came into to buy the largest food producers, you know, they merged with. And so you had these people who became especially good at getting people addicted to additives, you know, that they put into the tobacco, buy into and take over the food industry in America. And you want to look at a graph of decline of health, you'll see that starting after the 70s, when those companies left the world of tobacco and started taking over the food in America, our health went. Every single chart will show you the downfall, because the food became about money and selling and processing and addiction, and not about health in any way, in any real way, you know?
Yeah, the more you look into this stuff, the more it feels like we're rats in an experimental maze, I don't know, run by some 3-lettered organization or something, you know? But it's, what is it, man? I think it's like, some people theorize that we're actually in hell. That this place, this earth,
for them,
has always been equivalized with like the infernal realm.
I think it's heaven.
I think so. I think it's both, right? I think it will be either for a person depending on how they live, and I think sometimes it flips, right? Sometimes a person's in heaven for a while,
and then literally in the next fucking moment.
Oh yeah, everything flips.
And that's wild when that happens.
Oh yeah, and what's so interesting is it's like how I think the key to life is maintaining grace through those transitions of yin and yang, right? Of heaven, hell, right? Light and dark, right? When darkness is on top, it's like, try not to lose your shit, right? Just like it's dark, don't lose your stuff, right? And be
which can be challenging.
Can be. Yeah, some people, I think, when things get dark or scary, they react.
Especially biologically. You know, I mean, most people are okay until those biological programs are activated, the survival programs.
Sure.
The, oh, fuck, we're going to die, and then the body starts to do all kinds of things that make it much harder for the mind to maintain its grasp or its control.
Yeah.
That's my observation, my experience. Like you can be doing fine until that moment where your body starts to be like, oh, and by the way, we're fucking dying here. You know what I mean? Then all of a sudden you're like, well, fuck. God, I'm starting to sweat. I'm starting to lose it. It's all of a sudden, anxiety just goes through the roof. So then it's like, it feels like control has completely eluded you. And then it's a quest to kind of come back into and find a way back into your breath and your body and slowing your heart rate down. But
I think it reminds me of being in a car.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you get scared, and a person, they just floor it. That's what the fear response is, right? They're just flooring it. And it's like, you got to remember, you can take your foot off that gas pedal. You can slow down. And I think for so many people, it's like that fear possesses them because they run with it.
Yeah.
They try to run from it, but they don't notice that running away, it's the foot on the gas pedal into it. And what's, I think, in my experience, the most useful thing is always to slow down. I try to be, in my own world, very slow, because I'm a very fast person. I think very quickly. I can talk quickly at times. So throughout life, have made it a mission to be as willfully slow as I can be and comfortable. And what I have found is about 90% of the time, it's very hard for me to react to things.
Yeah.
The type of control it gives is very nice. And I think that...
It's an amazing quality.
Yeah. And it's just, I don't know, I imagine things are in slow motion.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, all of a sudden, when it's slow, you just notice more.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that picture's so pretty. Oh, man, it feels so good to be breathing. I think the slowness gives a sensuality to life, and it reveals the beauty of it. And when you're aware of the beauty, it's very hard to be frightened.
Yeah.
It's very hard to be like, oh no, like a flower. So I think the slowness brings that feminine quality back into the reality.
It's beautifully put. Yeah. And it's, those are wise words for, people who are listening, who are like, how can I kind of adjust my perception in a way that allows me to enjoy things easier? That's a slow down. It's just breathe and slow down, first and foremost. I wanted to ask you, Tyler, I have a few questions left for you, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to, and if you were comfortable with letting Rioka bring answers,
Sure.
If it's totally your call, I know every channel is different as far as, first of all, what they're willing to do, what especially like on short notice or whatever. Daryl has a whole copyright thing going on, I think. It's like, you have to book Bashar if you want Bashar. You can't just talk to Daryl and then have Bashar. I was like, what? Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, procedures. I see.
Well, and that has to do with the way he has his system set up. But that's neither here nor there. But we could do that. I could finish up with these few questions. You could, if you were, and only if you were totally. I'm not trying to.
I'd be happy to do some channeling. Channeling is one of my favorite things to do.
Okay, cool.
So I'd be more than happy to share it here.
Awesome. So let's do that, and then we'll finish with a few questions, and we'll let Rioka kind of have the mic. And
sounds great. Yeah.
Take your time, brother.
Thank you. So it's going to take me, just for the audience, take me a few minutes. I'm just going to charge up with some breathing and a little visualization.
Do you want to share? Do you mind sharing that process with an audience? Sure. I'm sure many are curious how you enter into the channel state. Okay.
Sure. So for me, I focus a lot on energy work and energy circulation meditation. This oftentimes involves combining visualized symbols with emotion and body sensation. So an example would be imagining that light is encircling your form, going up your spine and then down the front of your body, right? And just looping, right? That's an example of an energy circulation meditation. Or circulating energy currents through the organs, right? Kind of guiding chi through the natural meridians that connect all the different body parts. So I focus on these types of practices, and I usually orient the practice so that way it expands me into two major directions, into the earth, primarily for rooting. And the earth possesses a great deal of wisdom. There's a lot of wisdom that comes when you connect in. And also, the earth connection helps you absorb the radiation, right? Like we're taking in this astral light, and it's important to have really a coolant system so your body doesn't overheat. So there's a lot of connection into the earth. and then extension of the mind up into the cosmos. And then from this expanded state, we create a chi field where only the energy I desire can essentially access me. And once that bubble's been created, I focus that desire on the being.
Right.
I'm usually extending my mind up into their world. I'm pulling their world down into me. And then at a certain point, it's synchronized.
Right.
And once it's there, it's like they have the show. You
Right.
know, I'm in the background kind of enjoying and like contemplating and taking like a nap. Like it's very different for me. I think while the entity is very lively and is engaging with the person, I as Tyler, I am sort of dreaming. I'm like daydreaming, or I'm like watching the conversation and almost like taking notes, because for me, because I'm still somewhat present, the information as it comes is also new to me.
Yeah.
So I'm also in real time like, oh wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So
Totally. I know the experience. Yeah.
yeah. And then sometimes recently I've been blipping out, which is trippy.
Wow.
It's like you're getting sucked into like a little wormhole.
Yeah.
And you don't notice until you've returned.
Yeah. Until you're like, I wasn't there. Where was I?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think we all somehow know that feeling.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think, I think the real people talk about like immortality and, merging with God, but remaining intact, not dissolving. Sort of like Enoch becoming Metatron, right? He sees God face to face and is essentially granted like immortality as Archangel Metatron, right? Because he doesn't even physically die, right? He says he walked with the mighty ones and then became like them. They took him away.
Yeah.
So I think it's possible to go into those blip out moments, I think, and maintain consciousness. And I think that's what starts to create that transformation of human into angelic, to be able to withstand the oneness and to not be totally obliterated by it.
Right.
And then you're like a seraphim, right? You're just getting closer to what we might call the throne.
Yes. And I think meditation presents a very real opportunity for people to experience that over and over, I mean, that's
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I got to say, as a channeler, I love the chair.
Awesome,
They're so good, man.
Perfect.
It makes the difference. Well, I'll dive in. Just give me a few moments.
Take your time.
And then have at it.
Okay, bro.
All right. We thank you for joining us for this conversation. And we are so excited to be joining you in such a way.
Welcome, my friend. It's good to see you again. Rioka.
And it is wonderful to see you. How may we assist you and serve you in your process of exploration of the physical reality dream?
Well, my first question, I think, is more on your society or your civilization's relationship with humanity as you understand it. How are we related?
But we're related genetically. Do keep in mind that my people, the Sassanian people, we are a hybrid species. Our genome, in that sense, possesses genetic information that was extracted from your Earth and other Earths like your Earth. This extracted genetic information was, in a certain way, spliced or was blended together with the genetic information that is pertinent to the genome of the extraterrestrial species that many of you on Earth classify as gray. So my people are a blending, in that sense, of human genetics and gray genetics. It has been said before by other members, other representatives from my people, that we are, in that sense, a balance between the grays and your people. We possess in that way a 50-50 mix of both that allows for us to balance the light and the dark that represents the karma pertinent to both of these species, humanity and what you call gray beings. So it is important with the grays to understand there are many varieties of grays. They don't all have necessarily the same origin. Some beings turn into this. Their form becomes gray. Other beings are more so representations of higher non-physical energy, usually energies that is cognitively enhancing, energies that are cognitively enhancing, cognitively based. These energies, sometimes when they are materialized into form, will create physically a form that you would classify as a grave form. So some are more synthetically made, some are more naturally made, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. And from your perspective, as you observe both the human side of you and this world, which I'm assuming you have a very unique perspective of what's going on the planet today. What do you observe as the greatest challenge that humanity faces and human nature faces in order to kind of avoid yet possibly another, civilization-ending series of events? Or like, in other words, I guess, what do you see that we're doing what's obviously wrong, and what can we do to pull the craft out of the nosedive it seems to be in?
Sure. So the primary thing that we would advise for your people to assist in the reharmonizing of your collective energies would simply be to unwaveringly see the other as you. See the other as an extension of self. See the other as a divine messenger that the source has aligned you with so that you can go through a particular experience that is designed to grow you, it's designed to evolve you, it's designed to teach you something. So if you can see others as teachers, as divine messengers, automatically what will happen is you will treat the other as such. It will completely shift how you interact with other people. It will shift the nature of the conversations and the types of actions that you engage in with the person. So it can lead to entirely different outcomes, entirely different pathways of exploration. That's what we would encourage all of you to do, to become unwavering in that focus, to allow for that focus to transform into a type of portal. Because when you see everything as a single unified thing, it is as if the myriad of manifestations that you see around you return to the one, that original unity that holds the many forms of life and experience. That unity absorbs your mind gradually more and more and more the more you focused upon it. And as your mind merges with this collective unity, you activate your greater mind, you see. You activate your super intelligence. Many of you would classify this as your higher self. You begin to awaken that perspective, that level of consciousness, because the higher self can see how everything is connected because it possesses a higher vantage point. So when you see everything as one thing, and when you see all forms as creations that the divine has given rise to, you will interact very differently with your world, and your world will change overnight. It is the failure to do that, or the choice to focus on other things that are vibrationally lower than this type of perspective, that oftentimes hypnotizes your collective into cycles and states of unconsciousness that eventually they have to awaken from. And in those states of unconsciousness, actions are taken that are sometimes divisive. Actions are taken that can drive people apart. But once that light's turned back on fully, a person recognizes what they're doing. They recognize they have been under the influence of some type of spell. And from there, they begin to awaken others very slowly by just reconnecting to what is. More of what is true is revealed. When you connect to the present moment, your awareness of truth increases. So keep this in mind. The Akash is the space, the Akashic record of your ancient traditions. It is in the space, both the inner body space and the outer space of the room. So as you dial into the moment more, and as you begin to tune into that connection, your awareness of space also increases, because space is a unifier. Yes, all things possess a spaciousness, even the subatomics, as you know. These particles possess great spaciousness. So space is a unifying subject. It is a unifying manifestation. Therefore, when you focus upon it, the oneness is revealed, but the information that you call the recordings within the Akashic record, that information is then accessed. When we are speaking, when we are doing readings for people, we are reading space. This information that is being spoken through the channel, it is arising out of space, you see. It is summoned through the space itself.
Yes, quite literally, yes. Amazing. Thank you for that. It is. They don't call it the golden rule for nothing. It would make life. It would take us into a true golden era if we were to teach our young people and practice this on some societal level, as opposed to some of the lessons that we prioritize, which are not helping anything or anyone. So when you see the systems in place on this planet right now, and some of the figures who are extremely polarizing, the human inclination to look for and need a messiah figure, a savior, or where does that inclination come from, and when do you see us snapping out of this, what I believe to be, kind of this enthrallment or this misdirected faith in something outside of ourselves, which is going to change everything for the better for us, as opposed to us doing it ourselves?
Sure. So this perspective oftentimes can stagnate an individual, because if change is not generated from within, if it is only something that is created because of experiences that you have based on that which is without, you will be acting in a way that is similar to a puppet on strings. If you are simply responding and your changes are merely in accordance to what's happening outside of you, it will be as if your own will is undernourished. You must keep in mind that change is a foundational quality to existence. Yet how things change varies from subject to subject to subject. For you, for your life, change is something that is inevitable, yet you yourself are an agent of this change. Some changes are influenced by you. Some changes are influenced by the outside. Ideally, the inside and outside work together. You use your inner genius, you use your inner knowingness to adapt to the changes that the outer reality gives you. And in that choosing to adapt, in that choosing to respond intelligently and lovingly to the outer challenge, you have, in a sense, saved yourself. You see, your biggest challenge on earth, this was the question that you asked, your biggest challenge on earth is yourselves.
Yeah.
Because when you are not in touch with yourself, when you are not in touch with your divine power, it can be more challenging to be a free agent within the story of life. It seems like you're very aware of everybody else's wants, everybody else's path, everybody else's worlds, yet your own may seem very vague. It's unknown. Many people on your planet will say, well, I'm not sure what I believe about this. I'm not really sure what my thoughts are on this subject. I've never really gotten in touch with my inner self deeply, so I'm not sure what's there. For many people, the inner world is an uncharted world. And because it is an uncharted world, many people feel they need a guide, they need something external to hold their hand while they navigate those challenges.
Yeah.
They, in a certain way, see the problems that they deal with as being bigger than them. So having this external being, the Savior, the Messiah, can operate as a permission slip to more courageously explore that inner landscape and to integrate whatever comes up. So for some people, it's a symbol, it's a symbolic way relating to the self.
Yeah.
And it can be useful in that sense. But also do keep in mind, there are some souls that are born onto your planet that act as updates. Yes, you're familiar with these different generations of children. Yes,
Yeah.
the indigos, the crystal, the rainbow. Yes. So there are updates that souls whom incarnate on earth bring. Christ and others like Christ represent a very powerful cosmic update in human form that is meant to dissolve the veils that limit. In your Anunnaki creational stories, it is described that certain limitations were placed upon your consciousness. And the idea is these limits are put in place because your species was engineered to surpass the Anunnaki, to become capable of things which they themselves were not yet capable of. So these locks were put in place to contain that power. And the containment, a side effect of it, is the creation of certain levels of ignorance, the spirit world, of the self. So the Christ power, the Savior power, the Messiah power, symbolically represents a being coming to earth, carrying a certain energetic code that can awaken energies within the masses that pull the masses out of the cultural trance or whatever the trance is they're following.
Right.
So it's not so much that this being does all the work for you, but what it is a alarm clock. This being represents time to awaken, but now the responsibility is in your hands. Now that you are awakened, what will you do with this?
Yeah.
You see, that is what the Christ as a symbol and many solar beings as symbols are meant to represent.
Wow. That helps me understand a lot more about why humanity has, seemingly longed for, and been praying for this Messiah for so many thousands of years, because of these limitations, because of the either conscious or subconscious awareness that we are missing something, a very big part of the equation, which is, I think, one of the biggest sources of the dissonance and disease and problems that we face as a species, is that missing piece of the puzzle, and the realization that we need to find it some way. We need to be awakened to it. And like you said, this notion of a Messiah could act very much as an alarm clock. But you said two magic words that I remember learning about years ago, and it really kind of blew my mind when I learned about it. And I'm betting that most of my audience may not be as familiar with the notion that I believe it was Daryl or Bashar who brought to, but the notion of permission slips. Will you blow and reward the amazing cats who have stayed with us for this conversation? Will you explain to them a little what the notion of permission slips is and how they can understand it?
Sure. So keep in mind, a permission slip, concisely put, is any tool that you use to create a conscious change within your life that you would deem to be more preferable, that you would deem to be more positive. And ultimately, it is a tool that allows for you to feel more of yourself. It allows for you to, through feeling more of yourself, to choose more easily to be yourself.
Yeah.
So permission slips can be things you love to do. They can be meditation techniques. It could also be your favorite song.
Yeah.
It could also be your favorite food.
Some people reach for a beer.
Yes. That
I
can be
mean,
the permission slip. They're all just tools. Yes. They're all different. And different permission slips, while all valid, have different qualities. Yes.
Absolutely.
And side effects. Some permission slips to be more of yourself can be free of side effects. Some, well, there can be quite a bit. Alcohol, of course, being one of the ones that likely comes to mind.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a fantastic notion for people to be aware of. So I want to give you one more question before we finish, my friend.
Sure.
Is there a universal purpose guiding the human experience? And especially during these, what I mean, it seems like one crisis after the next. How can we align with that purpose, with that universal purpose?
Sure. So do keep in mind that you have your own sense of will. Will here is an expression of purpose. In a certain way, it is an expression of intention. Will itself comes from knowledge of the self. Once you know yourself, once you know what your values are, once you know what your path is, the next step is to create it, yes, to move forward boldly and give rise to it. This is will and the application of will. Divine will, divine purpose, is foundational. The divine will, the divine purpose, is a homeostatic force and mechanism. The way your bodies function, the way the cycles of nature functions, the way the cosmos function, and the celestial bodies within the cosmos, the way that they move. These are all expressions of divine will. These are all expressions of divine purpose. Fundamentally, the divine will, the divine purpose, has to do with the experience of as much novelty as possible and the generation of as much joy as possible.
Yes.
You see, diversity and joyfulness, novelty, and what we would describe as good pleasure. Yes, a positive type of pleasure. These are the things to focus upon in life. These are the things to orient one's life around. Because when you are focusing on those things, a higher type of pleasure, and creating new experiences, what you find is your life becomes more like an adventure, and you find that the creation of higher pleasure for you also means the bringing up of others around you.
Yeah.
So these are the foundational dimensions to the divine will. The will is to experience, and the divine will is to also optimize happiness and goodness. Now, when we say happiness, it is perhaps a little misleading. Many of you understand happiness as an emotion. When we talk about happiness, we are really referencing the source of happiness, which is, of course, love. It is the maximizing of love, and as an extension of love, joy, ultimately. That allows for you to connect with the synchronicities that you need to connect with that will help you align your personal will with that divine will. Because you may find in your own heart, in your own life, your will may be somewhat contradictory in certain areas to those two foundational things. But if you find your own personal will, your own personal purpose and intention, if you find these things are aligned with novelty and optimizing joyfulness, then your personal will and your actions will always be synchronized with the underlying intentions and energies of the divine mind. And in that way, you and the divine work together. And it's like the divine has your back. If you are willing to carry out the divine will, your personal will also be carried out. It's important to keep this in mind.
Yes.
So when you serve the divine will also serve you, because it is a two-way reciprocal relationship.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course. You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
And we appreciate you. Shall that be all for you this day?
Yes, my friend. Thank you so much.
Our unconditional love to you and to all those whom have listened in. We thank you for this unique and novel experience. Good day.
Good day.
Okay, good.
Well, awesome,
good,
man.
good.
Welcome back. God, that was beautiful. That was awesome.
Thank you so much. Forgot what you looked like. I was like, oh, there's Faust.
Hey,
What's up? Yeah.
what's going on? Man, this has been incredible. I'm so happy that we did it. Tell everyone. So everyone, Tyler has a YouTube channel which you should subscribe to. And if you're listening to this YouTube channel and mine, Far Out with Faust, and you're not subscribed, by God, hit the subscription button, because we know that like 70% of people who listen to our podcasts aren't subscribed, and we would love for you guys to be kind of more tuned in and aware when we drop an episode. And if you're listening on iTunes or any of the audio platforms, and you've enjoyed the podcast and have been enjoying it, don't be afraid to leave us a comment or two or in a 5-star review. we need those to accumulate. That's how we build our audience and reach and all that. But Tyler also has a YouTube channel called Health
That's right.
Thyself.
Health Thyself.
Tell
Yes.
everyone where they can find you. I'm sure after listening to this, they're going to be very interested in keeping up with you.
So there's a few places you can find me. YouTube, Health Thyself. That's the primary one. I'm also on Patreon as the Galactic Guide, and this is where we do weekly Q&As that are very intimate. People can ask questions to Rioka, the entity that we all heard here today. And it's amazing. The questions are always very powerful. The answers are very expansive, and it's a regular thing. And the same people come, and the community builds, and we get to really connect the dots. I mean, for me, the biggest joy is piecing together the mystery. And I find the audience really makes that happen, the questioners. So it's big stuff coming together with answers. But that's the Galactic Guide on Patreon. My website for booking sessions, if a person's interested in having like a one-on-one session with me or the entity, or they want training, if they want to learn how to study high magic or Taoist alchemy or Kundalini.
Or
Tantra,
learning to channel.
Or learning to channel. Thank you. Yeah, we also do that there
That's
too.
right.
TheGalacticGuide.com is the place for that. We're also on TikTok. I believe it's The Galactic Guide, and there's a period in there somewhere. The TikTok handles always throw me because I have to do little like interesting punctuations to get a version of my name that's not been taken already, which is fine. But those are the places you can find me. YouTube's great though. For those of you that aren't subscribed, you'll love it, and I recommend you subscribe because we do daily astrology, daily tarot, and daily numerology. So you can know the qualities of the day before you have to face it, so you can align your energies accordingly.
Awesome. Brother, it's been real. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Remember to question the answers. And I want to thank Tyler again for coming out, man. It's been awesome.
Absolutely.
So cool to reunite with you, brother. And thanks, everyone, for listening. Take care.